What is going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome to week 2 of fantasy football. Today, we're going to be talking about quarterback and tight end rankings here for this week. Now, we've already posted our running back and wide receiver rankings video, so if you haven't seen those yet, be sure to check them out. But maybe after this video, you find yourself wanting more. You want more rankings like kicker rankings, defense rankings, even flex rankings. We do those as well. They're all offered as a member perk, so consider hitting that little blue join button here under the video and becoming an official member of Headliner Nation. Not only are you going to get those extra rankings, you're going to get extra film session breakdowns, Discord access, a Sunday morning live stream for members only, a ton of perks to become a member. So be sure to check that out. But now let's go ahead and dive into the rankings. We're going to start off with the quarterback side of things. And like I say in all of our rankings videos, remember, if you're looking for more detailed information, that can be found in the start sit videos that posted earlier in the week. These are really just more meant to be a quick run through of our rankings, but here we go. Let's dive into quarterbacks. And number one for me this week, it's going to be Jalen Hurts. Now, a lot of people expected more from Jalen Hurts in week 1, myself included, but it was a pretty difficult matchup. Now he gets to go home and face the Minnesota defense, which is going to be light years easier for him in week 2. I have him bouncing back at number 1. Speaking of bouncing back, what about number 2? This is where I have Josh Allen coming off a horrific performance where he just couldn't take care of the football in week 1 against the Jets. Also gets to go home now to Buffalo against an easier opponent in the Las Vegas Raiders. He's at number 2. Number 3, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes, who's going down to Jacksonville to face the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence in a game that can be full of offense. And does he get Travis Kelce back this week? That would be a huge boost. He's at number 3. Number 4, this is where I have Justin Herbert, another quarterback that a lot of people expected more from in week 1. However, he didn't have a bad game. Now he goes to Tennessee and faces one of the worst secondaries the NFL has seen in a few years, looking for a big week from Justin Herbert. Then we go down to number 5. This is where I have Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars going up against Patrick Mahomes, who we just spoke about. Trevor Lawrence loves having himself a new alpha wide receiver in Calvin Ridley. Didn't even have to really utilize Christian Kirk last week. I'm really hoping that changes here in week 2 because they're going to have to try to keep pace with the Kansas City Chiefs offense. I got Trevor Lawrence at number 5. Number 6, this is where I have Lamar Jackson. Once again, another stud quarterback. We're looking to have a better week in week 2 than in week 1. He's going on the road to Cincinnati. However, he could really benefit from also getting back his stud tight end, Mark Andrews, another guy we're really paying close attention to this week. Number 7, this is where I have Joe Burrow. Once again, I feel like I'm a broken record, a stud quarterback looking to bounce back in week 2. Joe Burrow was horrific in week 1. Chalk it up to a little bit of rust, not playing much this preseason due to the strained calf. Looking for a bounce back at home against Baltimore. Number 8, Justin Fields. He's going to be on the road in Tampa Bay, a Tampa Bay defense that was just carved up by Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings. Now, obviously, Justin Fields, a little bit different style of a quarterback than Kirk Cousins. However, that rushing upside is going to keep him right here at number 8. Number 9, this is where I have Tua. He's going to be on the road in New England, a pretty difficult matchup. New England plays well against Miami pretty much every single year, but Tua's coming off a game in which he threw for almost 500 yards, and no one could stop Tyreek Hill. He's at number 9. Number 10, this may be a surprise to some people, but it's Brock Do-'em Dirty Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers on the road in LA against the Rams. Now, even though on paper this matchup may be somewhat difficult, Brock just strolled into Pittsburgh last week and put up a huge game. I'm looking for Brandon Ayuk once again in week 2. Got Brock Purdy at number 10. Number 11, it's Anthony Richardson on the road in Houston. Now, Houston isn't a pushover defense. They play against opposing quarterbacks pretty freaking well. I honestly could see Anthony Richardson going as high as like 7th in the rankings in a better matchup, but I am giving Houston a little bit of credit here. It's that rushing upside, though, that's going to keep Anthony Richardson inside the top 12 right here at number 11. Number 12, then, this is where I have Deshaun Watson of the Cleveland Browns. He's going on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Didn't really have to air it out much in week 1 due to some bad weather, but Pittsburgh just got torched through the air by San Francisco, so Deshaun Watson's going at number 12. 13, this is where I have Derek Carr, and it's great to see him start the season by airing the ball out and throwing it down the field deep to the likes of Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Now he's going on the road against the Carolina Panthers, who just lost one of their starting defensive backs in J.C. Horn. Derek Carr, number 13. 14 is Kirk Cousins playing Thursday Night Football, primetime Kirk, in Philadelphia on the road. This is going to be a tough matchup for Kirk Cousins, but don't just automatically think he's going to have a bad game. Last week, Mac Jones went out and threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns against this Eagles defense. Kirk Cousins at 14. 15 then is going to be Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions, going to be at home against the Seattle Seahawks, a team that was actually pretty disappointing last week in Seattle. I look for Jared Goff to get more opportunities to use Jahmyr Gibbs in the short passing game this week, but I got Jared Goff at 15. 16 is his opponent in that game, Geno Smith. Please, somebody bring back 2022 Geno, because what we saw in week 1, that wasn't it. His offensive line is already banged up and it's only week 2 of the season, so Geno Smith right now at number 16. 17, Jordan Love, Green Bay Packers on the road in Atlanta, and this guy just needs healthy wide receivers. We know right now that Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and then even at the running back position, Aaron Jones are not 100% healthy. Everybody in Green Bay dealing with hamstring injuries right now, and that's the only reason Jordan Love is this low. He's at 17. Then we move down to number 18, and this is where I have Daniel Jones, and yes, this may be a little low for a lot of people, but he's going to be on the road in Arizona, and no, that doesn't scare me. What really scares me is some of the decision-making we saw from Daniel Jones in week 1. Sure, that Cowboys defense is great. Sure, the weather was bad, but some of the decisions, some of the thought process that we saw from Daniel Jones in week 1 was enough to give me a little bit of pause for the cause, and that's why I've dropped him down to number 18. 19, his opponent last week, it's Dak Prescott. They won a game 40-0, and Dak had 0 touchdowns. Now, sure, that's a lot to do with the game script, but now they're going to be playing at home against arguably one of the best defenses in the league, the New York Jets, and that doesn't give me that warm fuzzy, so he's at 19. 20, it's the Bake Show. Baker Mayfield, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, going to be at home against a Chicago defense that was torched by Green Bay through the air last week. Even gave up a couple short touchdowns to Romeo Doubs. Could that be Mike Evans this week? That's why I got Baker Mayfield at number 20. Then we move down to number 21. This is where I have Russell Wilson, who really hasn't started to cook just yet with Sean Payton. He's going to be at home against the Washington Commandos. Now, what we're really paying close attention to here is when do we get Jerry Jeudy back? Because until we get Jerry Jeudy back, I don't know if we can start Russell Wilson in fantasy football because the ceiling is just so low. He's at 21. 22, it's Sam Howell, his opponent in that game, going to Denver. Now, Denver's defense didn't look great last week, but they are still a very solid unit, and Sam Howell last week didn't really air the ball down the field like I had expected. That's going to lower his ceiling as well. That's why he's at 22. 23 is where I have Kenny Pickett. A lot of people want to have him higher. Honestly, I would love to put him higher, but no Deontay Johnson, a banged-up Pat Freiermuth, and now we got to play against a Cleveland defense that absolutely destroyed and shut down Joe Burrow last week. I got Kenny Pickett down at 23, and then 24, this is where I have Mac Jones. I don't want to overreact on Mac Jones, but he looked pretty freaking good last week. This offense as a whole looks so much better with Bill O'Brien calling the plays than Matt Patricia last year. Now they're going to be at home against the Miami Dolphins, a Dolphins team that if they can put some points on the board, we're going to see Mac airing it out once again, and that's why I got him inside my top 24 at number 24. But don't worry, the rankings aren't over just yet. We still have to talk about tight ends this week as well. But that's not what I do. That's what the self-proclaimed tight end whisperer does. So we're going to throw it over to Kyle to find out which tight ends are the highest ranked in week 2.
Headliner Nation, the tight end position last week was absolutely awful, and now we need to try and make our way through that position again this week. Now, hopefully the guys that were injured last week are able to come back, and we can see a little bit of a bounce-back performance, but we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Let's dive into my top 18 tight ends. Number 1 is going to be Travis Kelce. Right now, he is still limited in practice, only partaking in some of the activities that they are doing, but we're going to have to just keep an eye on that, because if he plays, even if it is a limited fashion on Sunday against Jacksonville, he's absolutely in our lineup, and we don't even think twice about it. I mean, heck, this guy is going to be targeted like crazy after what they went through last week. Mark Andrews at number 2, also limited in practice still after missing last week. Another thing that we'll keep an eye on. One thing that's really interesting, nobody's really talking about this, but for as bad as the Chiefs looked last week without Travis Kelce, you could argue that the Baltimore Ravens also looked bad without Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is still a very important piece of that Baltimore Ravens offense, and this week against Cincinnati, he's absolutely going to be needed. TJ Hawkinson, since being traded to Minnesota last year, has at least 5 receptions in 8 of his 11 games. Now he's going to be going up against Philadelphia. They're probably going to be playing from behind a little bit, or at least playing an even game. So they're going to be passing the ball. TJ Hawkinson's going to see a ton of targets this week. Darren Waller also banged up right now. If he plays and is a full go against Arizona on Sunday, I'll have him up as number 4. But I also could see myself dropping him as low as number 8 as well and bumping everyone up behind him a spot. We'll see how he goes throughout the rest of the week. Keep an eye on that. Evan Ingram against Kansas City. One thing that I liked from Evan Ingram last week is that he's on the field a lot. Even when they split 3 out wide, Evan Ingram last week was one of those guys. They ran a lot of 12 personnel. We'll have to see if that keeps up against Kansas City. Now, if they do, unfortunately, that hurts Christian Kirk more than anybody. But if they go to a lot of 12 personnel, it means Evan Ingram is going to be on the field for everything. George Kittle at number 6 going up against the LA Rams. We would have liked to see a little bit better performance from George Kittle last week, but he was limited. He was banged up. Going up against the Rams this week, now that probably Brandon Ayuk is going to have a little bit more of an eye on him than maybe what he would have, I'm going to expect George Kittle to see a decent bounce back performance. Pat Freiermuth at number 7. He ended up having to leave last week because of chest injury, and right now he does not have an injury designation for his Monday night game. Now, will that change? Potentially, given that it is a Monday night game. And if you are somebody that has Pat Freiermuth and you're wondering if you should wait it out until Monday, as of right now, even without the injury designation, I probably don't risk it. And if you have someone decent, you go with them instead. However, if Pat Freiermuth does play on Monday night going up against Cleveland, he definitely could see a nice bounce back performance. Hunter Henry at number 8 going up against Miami. Last week, Miami did allow a touchdown to Donald Parham at the tight end position. Hunter Henry, we could see him get himself into the end zone again this week as well. Mac Jones loves some Hunter Henry, and I think Hunter Henry is going to continue that big performance that we saw last week. Dallas Goedert at number 9 going up against Minnesota. I do expect Dallas Goedert to get into the game plan a little bit more this week. It was mentioned by several people, we got to get Dallas Goedert in there. We got to get him rolling. We got to get, and I talked about that on the Start and Sit show, that there was no way that Philadelphia was going to look at the game film from last week and say, hey, we're not going to get Dallas Goedert more involved. He absolutely will be involved this week. David Njoku at number 10 against Pittsburgh. David Njoku right now for me is a guy that is very touchdown dependent. Same thing goes with Kyle Pitts at number 11. Both of these guys, we would love to see a little bit more volume for them. But given their respective offenses and the guys around them, I don't know if the volume is going to be there. It's almost like we have to wait on that touchdown every single week. When you look at Kyle Pitts, he averaged 22 yards per reception last week, but he only had 2 receptions. Is Atlanta going to get him more involved? Are they going to give him more targets? Are they going to throw the ball more? Is this going to be an offense that runs the ball 60% of the time? There's just so many question marks with Atlanta right now. Kyle Pitts can't go any higher. Sam Laporta, as we call him around here now, going up against Seattle. I like Sam Laporta this week. I definitely think he has an opportunity to eclipse the 5 targets that he saw last week. And I mentioned this in the Start and Sit show as well. He's a guy that is on the field for the running plays too. So if they have to check out of anything and they go to a passing play, Laporta is going to be out there because he's such a dominant blocker. Luke Musgrave at number 13. I mean, this is a guy that ran the most routes and saw the most targets of any skill position player for Green Bay last week. Going up against Arizona this week, I am being a little cautious with him. Last week we did see a few targets. I'd like to see a few more. Does he find the end zone? Obviously, Jordan Love loves him some Romeo Doubs. Will Aaron Jones play this week? If Aaron Jones doesn't play this week, Luke Musgrave probably goes up above David Njoku for me at least. So keep an eye on that too throughout the week. Hayden Hurst at number 14. Now, New Orleans might be a little bit more of a tougher matchup for Hayden Hurst, but he's being looked at by Bryce Young quite a bit. And maybe when you take a look at Hayden Hurst, he's not quite the guy that you look at and say, he's got the high upside that I need to win my league this week, but he should see enough targets that he doesn't have the floor that would absolutely kill you either. Tyler Higbee at number 15. Would have loved to have seen him more involved last week, but our boy Puka, he got himself 15 targets. Tutu Atwell went off last week as well. well. They just went a different route. Now they get San Francisco. This is definitely going to be a tougher matchup for him, but given how quickly they may need to get rid of the ball, Tyler Higbee could see some decent checkdowns to him. Dalton Kincaid at number 16. He's basically on the field the same as Dawson Knox is. Remember this offseason, we told everybody Dalton Kincaid's going to play the slot. Dawson Knox is going to be on the field at tight end. Both guys will be on the field at the same time. Now, Kincaid's performance last week really wasn't what a lot of people would have hoped for. That is a tough Jets defense, though. Now he gets Las Vegas. I would like to go a little bit higher with him, but I really want to see what type of usage we're looking at in these games and not really taking last week into account. If you need somebody that could have a higher upside than this, Dalton Kincaid probably has higher upside than Tyler Higbee and Hayden Hurst. But given the fact that there's just so many weapons around him, Kincaid for me is a guy just got a little bit lower this week. Cole Kmet at number 17. Listen, I just want to see the Bears get better on offense this week. There were some reasons why Justin Fields just didn't look good last week. Some rust. Maybe it was the offensive game plan that they had. Whatever it may be, Cole Kmet's still going to be a guy that sees a decent amount of targets. But we need to start hitting him for some bigger plays, or we need to start hitting him for some touchdowns. And Juwan Johnson at number 18 going up against Carolina. We'll see if he gets a little bit more involved this week. We'll see if the corners are able to maybe lock down New Orleans wide receivers a little bit more. And that happens, maybe Juwan Johnson sees a few more target and hopefully a touchdown to go with it. Now let's talk about a few guys that are just outside my top 18. Zach Ertz saw 10 targets last week and may end up being the guy for Joshua Dobbs, but I'm not going to go crazy with it as of yet. He definitely is a guy I think we should be picking up off the waiver wire. Unfortunately, even with all of those targets, he's not getting a ton of yards with it, but as he works his way back and starts feeling a little bit more like his old self after his knee injury last year, maybe those big plays start to pick up. Jake Ferguson going up against the New York Jets. Now, I really wanted to go higher with him. Honestly, his floor is so low though that I had to just say, okay, realistically, we're probably looking at this area again this week anyway. The Jets defense may end up locking down the wide receivers, giving Jake Ferguson enough targets, but he saw 7 targets last week and wasn't able to do much with those either. Now, if you were to say, Kyle, Jake Ferguson is going to have a perfect game given the matchup, then I would say his ceiling is probably upwards of number 14. So if you're watching this video and you're upset I don't have Jake Ferguson higher, just let me reiterate that again. His upside, given a perfect game, given the matchup, could go as high as tight end 14. But given what we saw last week, even with the targets and not being able to do a whole lot with them, we'll see if we're able to maybe get a little bit higher towards maybe like 18 this week, and we'll kind of go from there. Logan Thomas is a guy that also is going to potentially see a lot of targets from Sam Howell, but are we going to get some big plays? Are we going to get some touchdowns? Logan Thomas, to me right now, especially given the Denver matchup, is more of a like an emergency guy. Like if you have Travis Kittle, if you have Mark Andrews, if you have Darren Waller, if you have Pat Freiermuth, if someone were to miss a game this week, that's where Logan Thomas kind of comes into play for me, where we say, hey, we'll toss him in our lineup. The hope is he gets 6 to 8 targets and he makes a few plays, just enough not to lose our week. Dalton Schultz was a late addition to the injury report as well. He is a guy that once again saw a couple of targets last week, but not nearly enough. The big thing for Dalton Schultz is I'm going to mention him again this week, but Robert Woods is kind of taking a lot of those targets that we would have hoped Dalton Schultz would have been getting. If that continues to happen with Robert Woods, then Dalton Schultz is going to be in a position where he's just not going to have a whole lot of upside. Yo, Headliner Nation, we appreciate you checking out our quarterback and tight end rankings. Make sure you leave us any questions down in the comments below. For you members out there, if you have comments about your flex rankings, don't forget those drop on Thursdays as well. But Headliner Nation, I'm going to get out of here for today. Peace out, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch y'all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliner.